Hello, buddy. Welcome back to the 10 Man Score channel. I'm your host, Jeff, for 10 Man Taylor. Today, I'll be reacting to my third and final scary storyteller for y'all. And this one is Mr. Haunting. And the video that I'll be watching is 4 Disturbing True Motel Horror Stories. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn these lights off, move the camera up here for you guys. And let's get this reaction on the road and in the bag, shall we? Okay, here we go.
Motels, places where people stop for a night of rest during long journeys. But not every traveler leaves with peaceful memories. Some leave with nightmares they'll never forget. Tonight, we'll be diving into 4 disturbing true motel horror stories, all shared by real people who lived through them. Make sure you turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and get ready for chills. It was late November, and I was on a long road trip across states.
Okay.
I had been driving for almost 12 hours straight, and by the time the clock hit midnight, my eyelids felt like they were weighed down with bricks. I knew I couldn't push myself any further. I had to find a place to rest. Just off the highway, I spotted a neon sign flickering in the distance. Vacancy. It was a small roadside motel, the kind you'd expect to see in old horror films. Cheap paint peeling from the walls, a half-broken ice machine out front, and an empty parking lot with only a couple of cars scattered around.
I mean, hey, it ain't gonna be like a Best Western or Hampton, but if you see a hotel that's got a lot of rooms open and your eyes are getting heavy, then you might as well pull over and get a room and stay there for the night, because you don't want to keep traveling and fall asleep behind the wheel and wreck your car. But anyway, let's continue the story and see what happens next.
But at that moment, I didn't care. I just wanted to sleep. Inside, the lobby was eerily quiet. The clerk behind the counter looked half asleep, barely acknowledging me as I checked in. I paid cash, took the room key, and dragged myself down the dimly lit hallway until I reached my room. The room itself wasn't terrible. Stale air, thin curtains, and sheets that looked like they hadn't been changed in years. But again, I was too tired to care. I locked the door, pulled the curtains shut, and fell into bed. Within minutes, I was asleep. Sometime later, I woke up. I didn't know what had disturbed me, but something felt off. The room was pitch black, except for the faint orange glow of the neon motel sign seeping through the curtains. My heart was beating faster than it should have been, and then I heard it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound of gravel shifting under someone's footsteps. At first, I thought maybe it was just another guest walking to their room, but the footsteps didn't fade away. They stopped directly outside my window.
Yeah, if it was a regular guest that was staying there, they would have already went to their room by now. But if they're outside near your window, it's probably some crazy person planning on breaking in to rob you. You need to be alert and call the front desk if things go bad.
I froze. I told myself not to look, not to move, but curiosity got the better of me. Slowly, I lifted the curtain just enough to peek outside. That's when I saw him. A man was standing there, just a few feet from my window. He wasn't moving. He wasn't smoking or walking or doing anything a normal person would do. He was just standing, perfectly still, his head tilted slightly upward, as though he had been staring at my window the entire time I had been asleep. At first, I thought maybe he was drunk or high or maybe just lost. But the longer I looked, the more wrong it felt. His body language wasn't normal. It was stiff, unnatural, almost like he wasn't even human. My heart pounded in my chest. I dropped the curtain, slid back into bed, and tried to convince myself it wasn't what it seemed. Maybe he was just some random guy passing by. Maybe he would leave. But then, knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed through the room. He was knocking at my door. Every muscle in my body tensed. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. Another knock, louder this time. The doorknob rattled, as if he was testing it.
Call the front desk and tell them to call the cops. And if you don't take that threat, just pick up your cell phone and call the cops yourself. Because if he keeps on trying to shake that door to get in, it'll probably give way and he'll be able to attack you then.
I wanted to call the front desk, but my phone was charging across the room, near the door. That meant getting closer to whoever or whatever was on the other side. So I just stayed there, frozen, praying he would leave. Minutes passed. The knocking stopped. I gathered the courage to peek through the curtains again. He was gone. At least that's what I thought. But then I noticed something, a shadow stretching across the ground, just barely visible under the orange glow of the sign. He wasn't gone. He was still there, just standing in silence, waiting. I sat there wide awake the entire night. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind made my heart jump.
Call the front desk because I don't think he's going to leave until you open up the door. And I didn't care where your phone was at, just pick it up.
At some point, I must have dozed off, because the next thing I remember is the pale light of morning streaming into the room. When I finally dared to pull the curtains wide open, the parking lot was empty. Whoever he was, he had disappeared. Relieved, I got up to gather my things. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. On the inside of the glass, right where I had peeked out the night before, was a single handprint, clear as day. I hadn't touched the window. I hadn't been anywhere near it. That's when I realized, whoever that man was, he hadn't just been outside my window. At some point during the night, he had been inside my room. Motels are supposed to be a place of rest, but sometimes they hide the kind of nightmares you'll never forget.
Oh my goodness, how in the world did he get inside the room without making a lot of noise? Unless somehow he snuck into the front desk and grabbed a spare key and opened it up. But what was he doing? I don't know, but thankfully this person didn't notice anything missing. And I'll be doing what they're doing right now, just packing up and get out of there. So let's get to story number 2.
I was 22 at the time, traveling alone for work. Money was tight, so instead of staying at chain hotels, I usually booked the cheapest motels I could find.
Of course.
Most of the time, it was fine, dirty sheets, weak locks, the usual. But one night, I learned why some rooms are cheap for a reason. It was a Friday evening when I pulled into a small town motel off the interstate. The neon sign buzzed faintly above the office. Only a handful of cars were parked outside. I walked in, checked with the middle-aged woman at the desk, and paid for a single night. She gave me a plastic key card and pointed me to room 6. The hallway was dim and smelled faintly of mildew. The carpet squished slightly under my shoes as I made my way to the room. When I slid the key card into the lock, the light turned green. I pushed the door open and stepped inside.
Okay, right off the bat, I would be noticing that if the carpet was squishing every time you stepped on it, it's probably time to clean it or remove the whole carpet and redo that flooring. But of course, people that own these other type of hotels that are not like the luxurious type ones won't have enough money to do all these renovations.
That's when I froze. The room wasn't empty. There was a man lying on the bed. He sat up slowly, eyes bloodshot and face pale in the glow of the lamp. For a second, we just stared at each other in silence. You're not supposed to be in here, he muttered, his voice low and scratchy. My stomach dropped. I'm sorry, I stammered. They gave me this key at the desk. Room 6. His eyes narrowed. This is my room. I backed up toward the door, heart racing. Maybe it was just a mistake, a mix-up with the keys. But as I reached for the handle, I noticed something that made me pause. The man wasn't unpacked. No suitcase, no clothes, nothing in the room except for him. The bed looked barely used, as though he had just been sitting there waiting.
At that point, I'll be like, what he was thinking. The front desk probably gave him the wrong key. But if you don't have no luggage, then that old man must have snuck in and didn't expect another customer coming in there. Just back up and get out of there and request another room.
I'll just go back to the front desk, I said quickly, stepping out into the hallway. I shut the door and hurried back. The woman at the counter frowned when I explained what had happened. That's impossible, she said flatly. Room 6 is empty. I just cleaned it myself. No, there's a guy in there, I insisted. I saw him. He was on the bed. She stared at me for a moment, then gave me another key card, this time to room 9. I didn't argue, I just wanted out of there. But as I walked down the hall toward my new room, something gnawed at me. I couldn't shake the image of that man's face, his expression more confused than angry, almost desperate. I swiped the new key and slipped inside room 9. This one looked normal, suitcase stand, clean sheets, nothing out of place. Still, I locked the door, latched the chain, and sat on the bed with my heart still pounding. I told myself it had to be a mistake. The clerk must have accidentally double booked the room. That had to be it. But at around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of scratching. It was faint at first, like nails dragging along wood. My heart thudded as I sat up in bed.
No, I don't think that woman accidentally double booked that room. She says she cleaned it herself and nobody was in there. Then she didn't know nothing about that man. Unless if she had the door open, he probably would have snuck in and waited for her to leave and then lay in the bed. That's the only possibility I could come up with. But it'd be creepy just to hear scratching while you're trying to rest in your room.
The noise was coming from the door. I held my breath, straining to listen. Scratch, scratch, click. The handle jiggled. Someone was trying to open it. I whispered, "Who's there?" But there was no answer, just the sound of the handle twisting back and forth. Then, a quiet voice slipped through the crack of the door. "They gave you the wrong key." I froze. It was the same man from room 6. The chain lock strained as he pushed against the door. I scrambled for my phone to call the front desk, but by the time I turned back, the scratching had stopped. The hallway outside was silent. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. When morning came, I stormed down to the front desk, demanding answers. The woman looked at me with a blank expression. "There was no one in room 6, she said firmly, "and no one checked in last night except you." I didn't believe her. I packed my things, got into my car, and drove off without looking back. But as I pulled onto the highway, I glanced at my rearview mirror, and there he was, the man from room 6, standing in the parking lot, staring at me. And this time, he had a key in his hand. Sometimes the wrong key doesn't just open the wrong door. It lets something in that was never meant to leave.
I don't blame him for going to the front desk demanding answers because I'll be thinking that they're lying too, but why would they do that? Unless you show them who the guy was and they'd be like, "We don't know that guy. He came in here by himself, it seems like." But how in the world did he get another one of them room keys? Unless he was able to get one of their universal keys that go to all the rooms. I'm just glad he got up out of there and continued on his merry way because I cannot stand to be in a hotel where the staff don't take action on the claims that you're saying and that man is still roaming freely around there. It might cause harm to the guest.
I had been on the road all day, exhausted from driving through the storm. By the time I pulled into the motel, it was almost midnight. The parking lot was nearly empty, the flickering neon sign buzzing weakly above the lobby. I just wanted a bed and a few hours of sleep. The woman at the front desk barely spoke as she handed me my key. "Room 14, she said. Her eyes lingered on me a little too long before she looked back down at her paperwork. I brushed it off and headed toward the hallway. The corridor was long and narrow, lined with dull yellow wallpaper that was peeling in places. Every few seconds, the old fluorescent lights above would flicker, buzzing as though they were on the verge of dying completely. I found room 14 about halfway down and slid my key in. The door opened with a groan. The room was nothing special, stale-smelling sheets, an outdated TV, and a window facing the woods out back.
Talk about a classic-looking hotel, right? But sometimes these lower-end hotels, they don't give a darn. They think it's clean enough for them and they just slap it on and they just put you in a stinky room.
I locked the door behind me, tossed my bag on the chair, and collapsed onto the bed. Within minutes, I was asleep. I don't know what woke me. Maybe it was the storm outside, or maybe it was something else. I sat up, disoriented, and glanced at the clock. It was 2:47 a.m. The motel was silent except for the hum of the heater. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps echoing through the hallway outside my room. I held my breath and listened. The steps moved closer, the sound distinct against the old carpet. I waited for the sound of a key card, a door opening, anything, but it never came. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. My pulse quickened. After a few tense moments, I heard something else, 3 slow knocks. I froze. Whoever it was didn't say a word. No housekeeping, no front desk, just silence. I leaned forward and whispered, "Who is it?" My voice shook. No response. I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. But the hallway was empty. There was no one outside. I backed away, my chest tight. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe I was still half dreaming. I climbed back into bed, but sleep was impossible. Every creak of the building set me on edge. At around 3:30, I heard the footsteps again. This time, they came from the opposite end of the hallway. Slow, dragging, almost like someone walking barefoot.
At that point, I'll be creeped out of my mind and praying to God that they hurry up and get into their room because nobody don't want to hear people dragging their feet throughout the night.
I sat up, staring at the door. The steps grew louder, closer, until they stopped again outside my room. And then came the knock. 3 dull thuds. I jumped up, heart pounding, and ran to the door. Again, I looked through the peephole. The hallway was completely empty. Only this time, the lights were off. The corridor beyond my door was swallowed in darkness, except for a faint red glow at the far end. I blinked, trying to adjust my eyes. That's when I saw it, something move. A shape, tall and thin, standing perfectly still just beyond the reach of the light. I stumbled back from the door, my chest tightening with panic. Whoever or whatever it wasn't going away. Suddenly, the handle rattled violently, as though someone was trying to force their way inside. I rushed forward and held the lock in place, my shoulder pressed against the door. After what felt like an eternity, the rattling stopped. Silence filled the room. I dared to look through the peephole one last time. The hallway lights were back on, and it was empty again. Shaking, I grabbed my bag, deciding I couldn't stay another minute. But as I turned to the window, I froze. Outside, in the faint glow of the parking lot lights, I saw the same tall, thin figure, standing perfectly still in the rain, facing my room. I didn't sleep that night. I sat awake until the sun finally rose, then checked out without saying a word. The woman at the desk looked at me knowingly as I handed her the key. She leaned forward slightly and said in a low voice, "You saw him, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I just left. And to this day, I can still hear those footsteps echoing in my head whenever I walk down a dark, empty hallway.
So the people at the front desk knew about this person, probably the ghost of a former guest, and he's now haunting that place. I don't know, but that'll be terrifying to hear. I know he don't want to get involved with all that stuff. He just wanted to get out of there.
Some hallways are never truly empty.
You got that right.
Sometimes they're waiting for you to listen. It was late summer when I checked into a small roadside motel after my car broke down. The repair shop told me it would take until morning, so I needed a place to stay for the night. The town was quiet, too quiet, and the only motel nearby looked like it hadn't been updated in decades. The man at the counter was old, with sunken eyes and a voice that rasped when he spoke. I asked for a room, and without looking up, he slid a key across the desk. The tag read Room 6. I made my way down the narrow hallway. The air smelled of mildew, and the carpet squished slightly under my shoes, damp from years of neglect. My stomach sank as soon as I saw the door to Room 6. Unlike the others, which had modern locks, this one still had an old brass keyhole. The room itself wasn't much. Faded curtains, a crooked painting, and a bed that sagged in the middle. I didn't care. I was too tired. I set my back down, locked the door, and lay down on the bed. First, it was quiet. Then I started noticing the noises, scratches, coming from inside the walls. At first, I thought it might be mice or rats, but the scratching was deliberate, slow, rhythmic, like fingernails dragging against plaster. I tried to ignore it, but when I turned off the lamp, I heard something else, a whisper. It was faint, so faint I thought it was the wind, but it seemed to come from the direction of the closet. I sat up, staring at the closed door. The whispering stopped. I forced myself back under the covers. Exhaustion finally took over, and I drifted into a restless sleep.
I don't know. Something's going on here. Room 6. Just like in the second story. I know they're different hotels, but I mean, like, golly, what is so special about room 6? Must be something not from this world inhabiting it. Because I'd be creeped out too if that room was the only one that had a brass keyhole and all the furniture looked outdated and the bed was sagging. I'll be wondering, what did I get myself into?
But around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of my door handle turning. Slow, careful, like someone trying not to wake me. I held my breath and stared into the dark. The lock clicked, but the door didn't open. Whoever it was stayed there for a long moment. I could hear shallow breathing on the other side. Then, finally, the sound faded away. I was shaking now. I thought about calling the front desk, but when I grabbed the phone from the nightstand, there was no dial tone, just static. I left the light on the rest of the night. By morning, I was ready to leave. I shoved my clothes into my bag and went to the door. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The keyhole. There was an eye staring back at me. I stumbled backward, my heart racing. But when I looked again, it was gone. I didn't care anymore. I yanked the door open and rushed down the hall to the lobby. The old man was still at the desk, sipping black coffee like he hadn't moved all night. I slapped the key down and demanded, "What the hell is wrong with room 6? For the first time, he actually looked up at me. His expression was flat, almost bored, but his eyes were cold. "You stayed in room 6? He asked slowly. I nodded. My throat was dry. He leaned back, sighed, and muttered, "You're lucky. Most people don't make it till morning." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, my voice trembling. He just shook his head and looked back at his paperwork, refusing to say another word. I didn't press him. I left that motel and never looked back. But ever since that night, I can't shake the feeling that something followed me. Sometimes, when I'm about to fall asleep, I hear the scratching in my walls. And every so often, I wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of a door handle slowly turning. Some rooms should stay empty. Room 6 is one of them. Motels can seem ordinary, but sometimes the darkness within them is anything but ordinary. These stories serve as a reminder that behind closed doors, not every place of rest is safe.
First of all, I'd like to point out that old man must have forgot that he put that dude in room 6 because he described him handing him the key. But then he tells him that nobody that stayed in that room don't make it till morning. But why'd you put him in there then? Golly. And then when he tries to press him on for more information, he don't want to say nothing. Be like, what happened in that room? I mean, did they have a series of unfortunate events where guests died in there and now they're trapped in that room tormenting the other people? I don't know. But that's just creepy. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more Mr. Haunting related content like this. This has been another successful installment of the 10 Man Score channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey 10 Man Taylor, and that's a wrap, and have a nice day.